Hello everyone, my name is Paul Third. I'm losing my voice, so I'm going to try and keep this short and sweet. I just want to make a quick video talking all about audio plugin comparisons. Can you trust an audio comparison? Like say if it's between 2, 3, 4 different plugins. Say it's 4 or 5 SSL plugins, Neve plugins, API plugins, and they've all been set the exact same way. The compression settings are the exact same, EQ frequencies are the exact same, the Q factors are the exact same, the boosts are the exact same, all the other functions that they offer have been set the exact same way. Is that the best way to set up an audio comparison, and can you trust it? And in nearly all cases, the answer to that will be no. And I'll tell you why very quickly, and I'll give you a few examples as well. Now, just because a plugin says 100 Hz on the dial does not necessarily mean that you are boosting 100 Hz. People have tested out the Plugin Alliance stuff, and I showed last week in the SSL video that even though it says one frequency on the dial, all three, right, CLA Mixhub, the original waves, and this new EV2, all of them fluctuated frequencies. Not one of them matched the dial perfect. You might find that 100 Hz boost actually is an 80 Hz boost, or 120 Hz boost, or maybe even like 105, 110 Hz. And you will find this in a crap ton of analog emulations. Because why? Because they model the hardware, and hardware in its nature has variances of tolerance in there. That's why Brainworks have the TMT options. And what do the TMT options do? They shift the frequencies, they shift left and right. There is hardware tolerances. So even in the analog realm, just because you'll have like loads of different dials and that'll say 100, 150, 200, 250, 300. If you set it to 300, it might be at 320, it might be at 280, it might be at 275. Then you might get another analog EQ that's the same model, same brand, and that one measures 305 or that one measures 275. There are always going to be some forms of analog tolerances, and not every plugin is modeling the same analog gear, which means if you've got 5 different SSLs or 5 different Neves or 5 different APIs, you may find that the frequencies on the dials match slightly different. Now, I've seen something on the Acustica page where somebody was mentioning that, why don't you just get the frequencies to match what it says on the dial? And Giancarlo commented, and long story short, basically told him, we model the hardware exact. If the dial says 150, but it measures 80, then we're not going to change the dial because that's what the analog is. Okay, we are sticking to the hardware. And I suppose that user is kind of right to a certain degree, as the analog guys, right? The analog guys can't measure every single unit, right? What they'll do is they will say make a couple of units, and they'll say, right, this is the frequencies that we're aiming for. But if you make 1,500, 3,000, 5,000, 6,000, 10,000 units, and being realistically, right, the hardware manufacturers don't have the time or probably the costs to be able to measure each individual unit and tailor the dials to read exactly what the frequency is, right? They have a set frequency and they aim for it and they go, right, let's make them and let's hope to God that they're as close as we can get, right? And in a sense, in the analog realm, see them more as estimations, right? We'll want it to be 100 Hz, but it might be 110, might be 120, might be 80, might be 90. Where in the plugin realm, you genuinely can do it because your plugin is always going to measure that every day of the week, right? You have one plugin, you've modeled one analog unit, you know that if it reads 100 and it actually comes out as 80, then you can just change it to 80. You can actually do it. So I get both angles, right? I get where this guy's coming from, but I also get where the developers are coming from as well. And they're just like, look, we're just sticking to the hardware, right? If that's what the hardware says on the dial and we measured that and it measured that, that's what we're going to see. So I do genuinely get it from both ends, right? But in the end, in my opinion, it doesn't bother me that much because I use meteors anyway. I'm in the mix, I'm just like tweak. Does it work? Does it not work? Right, whatever. Right, that's kind of what I do now, right? But however, what it does show is that there are genuine tolerances from unit to unit, which means that in plugins, there will be tolerances from unit to unit if they have modeled them correctly. Now, in terms of when there could be a time that you could set the plugins the exact same way, is if you go to the bother of measuring the plugins and you can see that they measure the exact same way. So in last week's video with the Waves EV2, I showed that the compression ramp and also the attack and release shapes were the exact same. They measured identical in the exact same settings, and also all the width functions measured the exact same as well. Now, I think it's very important that you test all of this out when you're doing audio comparisons. Reason for that being is that your outcome is going to be fair. All of these plugin developers are constantly fighting each other and they all want your business. So if you're unknowingly giving one an upper hand in a certain way, if somebody likes a certain part of the compression or they feel that there's an inaudible difference and it's due to the fact that they aren't set close enough, then you're doing that plugin an injustice. And that's why I think it's so important, especially on YouTube, when we're making audio comparisons and kind of doing plugin shootouts and essentially influencing the end user's decision at the end of the day. Their conclusion may be based on the test that you've made. So to me, it's vital that we ensure that you're giving each plugin a fair level playing field as close as possible. You don't need to use visualizers. I was using my ears for the longest time, but using your ears takes so long. And nearly all of my analog versus digital shootouts that I did, they were all done and tweaked by ear. I would get the analog, and then I would sit with like maybe 2-3 other plugins, and I'd tweak. Is that close to the analog? And then I get to the other plugin, and I'd just go back and forth, hours upon hours, until I felt I got it right. And I know in my heart of hearts that I gave each plugin a fair level playing field, right? Because to be fair, there's one thing we can say about my analog versus digital shootouts. They do sound pretty damn close, to be fair. And from last week's video, there were a few people that were a little bit skeptical. There was actually one subscriber that called me misleading and basically told me that they could prove that I was wrong, stating that the SSL EV2 from Waves is actually the CLA mixhub, just with different THD. Now, I know I wasn't being misleading because I know when to trust plugindoctor and kind of when not to trust plugindoctor. I know when something measures the same, and I know how to test it. So just to kind of really iron out this whole misleading thing, I have set up a null test, right? So for anybody that doesn't know, when you're wanting to compare the differences between two files, you take one file, take another file, you reverse the polarity of that file. So obviously you've got to ensure that they're both positive phase, right? So you have both positive phase, you flip the phase of that, negative phase, and what you're going to be left with is a delta signal, which is your difference, right? It's your null. If there is no signal, then there is no difference because there is no delta signal. And what I am going to show you guys is the compression of the EV2 and the CLA mixhub, both the exact same settings, which is what I measured in plugindoctor. And I'm also going to show you the width function as well. Now this is without the THD because I know there are differences in THD because I measured it. I know that I'm not going to use the EQs because I know that the high pass filters and also the curves, I can't get them 100% bang on. To get a full null, it needs to be 100% perfect. No difference in the slightest. Honestly, one little slight difference can completely throw it off. And before you know it, you've got like no delta signal and you've got like -70, -60 dBFS. So here is the proof that you can set the CLA mixhub and the EV2 the exact same in terms of compression and the width function, and they are exactly identical, and here is the null to prove it. And there you have it. Proof beyond any reasonable doubt, right? The science has proved it, right? There's times where you just can't argue with the science, right? There's your proof that the compression and also the width functions of the CLA mixhub were ported directly into the EV2. It wasn't remodeled from the ground up. Okay, the EQs are slightly different, the THD is massively different, but the compression and also the width function is the exact same and identical. So if I was to do an audio comparison between the EV2 and the mixhub, I would have the compression and the width functions at the exact same settings. The EQ curves, I would match them in plugindoctor, because again, they aren't exact. So again, just to make sure that the curves are as close as possible. And then in a sense, we would just let the THD do its thing. And from there, we'd be able to hear just how different the two plugins sound with the differing THD. Now, again, I'll show you another example, right? So here is two SSL style compressors, right? So here is the BX Townhouse compressor, and here is the Tone Empire Model 5000. As you'll notice, they do have the exact same compressor settings. And as you can see, even when they are at the exact same compressor settings, that does not mean that the compression is the exact same. And normally you'll see it most in the release. So as you can see, even though the release is the exact same, the shape of the release is completely different in both. And it doesn't matter how I affect both, the differences is the differences. I can't get the release of the Model 5000 to match the Townhouse and vice versa. It just is what it is. So I can have them in the same settings, but I do understand that there are differences and I can't get them any closer. However, there may be times when you can get them a little bit closer. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the BX consoles, right? So I'm going to show you, this is the BX console 9000J, and I've got the, is it the 4000E? I can't remember. It's the E and the J anyway, right? So as you can see, in the exact same compressor settings, the ramp doesn't match, and also the attack and release don't match either. Again, the release isn't right, but I can get the release to match a lot closer, and it is only as much as a 5 millisecond change. And as much as it is only a 5 millisecond difference, there is a difference, and that 5 milliseconds of a difference may be the difference that makes one person maybe feel that they prefer that specific plugin more. Now, the thing about the SSL consoles is that you don't have any option of the attack. It's either like, I think it's like normal, slow, or fast. But you do have your release. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do one final test for you, right? What I've done is I've done another null test. And what I've done is I've set the compressor at the exact same release settings. Obviously, you'll notice the threshold's different because, again, I need to get the compression right. And the way that I get the threshold right is by looking at the ramp. So what I'm doing is in the linear section, I ensure that when I'm bringing up the threshold, right, and it's compressing, I make sure that the levels always kind of match and they're quite close. Because in plugindoctor, what you want to do is you want to have both ramps measuring the exact same. You don't want them to be different, right? You want them to be measuring the exact same way, so then when the threshold does kicks in and it starts to compress, you can get it as close as possible. So in a sense, it's a very, very good way of knowing how to set your threshold to ensure that you're getting very close to the same sort of compression, because even though one might be showing, say, 4 dB compression, you might actually find that the exact same compression in the other compressor may be showing maybe 3.5 dB again reduction. You know what I mean? Use the tools that you've got to analyze it, just so you can make sure that what the dials are measuring are as close as you can get. And you can use your ears as well as a double check. But however, here is a final test to kind of prove what we were saying in plugindoctor is right, and just in terms of the release. So the first null readout will be with the exact same release settings, and the second null will be with the release settings matched with the shape being very close in plugindoctor. And as you can see with the release settings matched closer via plugindoctor, you get a smaller null, thus there are less differences. And as much as it may be small, there is still a difference, and that slight difference, maybe 0.3, 0.6, maybe as much as maybe sometimes a dB of a difference, may be that difference that makes somebody think that that plugin's better than the other one. You don't know how somebody's going to perceive audio, but if you're going to do an audio test, then I do genuinely believe that you should measure your plugins and you should try doing null tests as well, just to ensure that you are giving each plugin a fair level playing field. So just to kind of sum up, guys, right? If you are on YouTube and you see like audio comparisons with like plugins and stuff like that, and you notice that they're all set at the exact same settings and they're analog emulations especially, I would be very, very cautious on making your assumptions based on that test, because there is probably going to be many variables that you do not know about. If you want to genuinely know that that plugin you're thinking about buying does a better job than this, honestly guys, to ensure that your money is being well spent, go into analyzers and do whatever tests that you need to do to ensure that your curves are matched, that your compression is matched as close as possible, your level matched, and any other features that you're using can be matched as close as physically possible. As I've proved, you can use your eyes and you can use analyzers, okay? But again, these are very important as well. Use your eyes, use your ears, and you should be fine. Leave your comments down below what you think as well. My name's Paul Third, and I'll see you again next week.